On this week's episode of the Investors Corner, sponsored by Avocado Property, me, Mike and Ian are going to talk about the Landlord Success Triangle: money, time and freedom. We'll have a look at how much money you actually need to put into an investment to make it work for you and what the ongoing costs of investing in property are. We'll talk about time, how much time you actually need to look after an investment property if you do it yourself. And we'll look at freedom. What is your end goal and how long do you want that end goal to come? So make sure that you're listening to this one. This is a great episode for landlords.
Welcome to the Investors Corner podcast. Off camera, me and Andy did get the giggles for 5 minutes then, but I'm back. There's three of us.
Back.
Yeah. The three musketeers are back in town to help landlords and property investors with some new knowledge. Little hook for you. 2.7%. is a deal of the week, I've been informed, for buy-to-lets. 50% loans of 2.7%.
That's right.
That's crazy, isn't it?
I mean, I'm going to lead this podcast.
Arrangement fee. Or...
I'm going to lead it with, it might be the best time to buy a buy-to-let than what it's been in the last 2 years, potentially. So,
yeah,
you know, that's
good.
Straight in there. What does that mean? Well, if you were buying a property at 350, which is roughly average house price, depending on which metric you're looking at, but let's call it 350 if you were buying a 3-bedroom property in England, you got to put 175k down, 25k down in stamp duty, so you need 200 grand cash, and then after that, £644 a month on the interest rate. That's repayment over 30 years. I'm not a mortgage advisor. Don't try and come at me for that mortgage deal, because by the time this goes out, it might not be available, but 650 quid a month on a 350 house. Rent for that's going to be what, 1650, 1700. Yeah. So I would go back to saying, like, from a monthly profit point of view, after tax, this, that and the other, that's a decent amount of money you're making profit on that sort of buy to let. Now the interest rates are that good.
Yeah. Yep. It's definitely got better, isn't it? And they needed to do something to bring new landlords into the market, or keep existing landlords there. So yeah, it's great to see those rates going down. I remember probably about 18 months ago, and you looked at the buy-to-let rates, and it was like, this doesn't work.
No.
Yeah, they were all high fours, low fives.
The maths didn't work on it. You couldn't get the lending because you were looking at like 6% and stuff, weren't you? So,
but do you think now, really, if you're looking at a buy-to-let, you want 50% deposit? I think that's the issue, right? It's the cash reserves that if you've been saving up 100 grand to buy a buy to let and you're looking at a 350 purchase, it's probably not going to work. You're going to need a fair chunk of cash. So does that mean the demographic of what we're looking at for new landlords, where it has been, I think probably business owners that are pulling dividends out and using that and leveraging that in a slightly different way is one topic, but I also think we're now looking at maybe trying to target, especially with what is the rumour around budgets and downsizing and different taxes, etc. But I think if you're 60 plus, you're mortgage free, and you've got 200, 300, 400, 500 grand cash sat in your bank account, which a lot of people in the home counties in London will do at that generation. We know that's where a lot of the UK's cash reserves are, in that kind of 60 plus generation. They have been all selling, but I'd actually say now you're in a safer bet to potentially look at how you use property purchasing for inheritance and for pension planning, and looking at this as a real solid look, regardless of what the interest rates say there. Yeah. But I think if you're in that generational bracket, that's something you should seriously consider now. If things are going to go the way we might think they might do with property purchasing, regardless of the stamp duty level, I think that's a pretty safe place to put your money.
It's always been a safe place. It's just the revolving door of tax regulation, whether it's the right place at the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's when we'd me and Mike did a podcast a few weeks ago, and we said, look, has property still got its place as an investment, or do you put your money into other aspects? But it comes back to property is always the safest thing to do. But all depends what regulations come in and all of that sort of stuff that will eat into that financial element of your of your investment.
I think I agree, but I think there's a simple metric that we can look at when it comes to that group of people that have got good money sat in their bank account.
Yeah.
And that is that if your high interest saving account, the interest rate is now below
doing about 4 tops.
I think they're in the threes now. Like a lot of them are getting down into the threes now.
Yeah.
And where they were at 1.5% better than that, and property prices weren't growing at a solid rate, and inflation was sat where it was, and interest rates were quite high. All of a sudden, if you actually start to run it back, okay, saving rates are now about 1.5% lower. Mortgage rates are 2% lower, which is obviously part of the seesaw effect. And property prices, where they maybe were 1.5% reduction on a 12-month rolling, they're now about 0.5%, 1.5% rolling upwards. You throw those 1% in different directions, and all of a sudden, a buy-to-let is a nice, solid, equity climbing asset all of a sudden. And
especially, again, going back to what we talked about last week, it's one of the only assets where you can leverage it with borrowing. So if you're leveraged, then any gain that you make is multiplied because you haven't put 350, 375 down. You can put half that down or less.
Yeah. And we're going into Q4, which for me, if I'm a strategic, long-term thinking property investor, I would always be buying my buy-to-lets in Q4.
August and December, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always good times.
Really good times. Stock levels and availability are quite high for agents across the board at the moment, which means there is a fair chunk of negotiating going on. We saw some statistics yesterday that the way to get a property to sell if you are a seller when it's not selling is it needs at least a 7% reduction to make it work. So if we look at 7% off an asking price for a property that's maybe been on the market for 6 weeks plus and hasn't had one, that's your negotiating power is around the 10% on a property like that. That's also a percentage swing that was different because it hadn't been like that for a while. So I think if you're out there and you've got the cash reserves, that's the big if you've got the cash reserves, then it's a pretty good time to start picking up some of those buy-to-lets with long-term thinking, thinking for a decade, lock in those interest rates. That is strange that interest rate is for a 2-year fixed and it's about 0.75% higher if you do it over a 5-year fixed. It's normally the other way around, isn't it? But
yeah, it's normally the shorter it is.
But for buy-to-lets, it's not that way round. If you're a first-time buyer, they're kind of tempting you into the 5-year fixed at the better rate. If you're an investor, they're tempting you into the 2-year fixed. So I don't know if you've got an opinion on that. Yeah, I mean, we're not mortgage advisors, obviously, but...
Well, I think in theory, you should have to pay more for the additional security. I get why that is the logic behind it. And if you're doing a 2-year, then the banks do get to rip you for an arrangement fee 2.5 times over the same fixed rate. In that you're doing it after 2 years, and then after 2 years, and then you're sort of halfway through your next 2-year span. So it might actually end up cheaper to do the 5-year fixed at 0.75 more expensive. So always get your broker to do that equation for you.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I just thought I'd throw that in there. Not been on the podcast for a while, so there you go.
There you go.
That's my insight. See you in 26. So topics that you wanted to kind of cover a little bit, Andy. You kind of did a little bit of deep dive research into things at the moment. I gave it the abbreviation in my own head as the TMF, which you've titled as the Landlord Success Triangle.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I like that one, don't you?
Should I help you with that? Or that's for you.
I did get a little bit of help.
This feels way too neat to be Andy. It must be AI. So
yeah, well, I sort of asked. I did a bit of chat and sort of asked it. What is the? How can we look at investing in property in a way that's just nice, clear, and easy to understand? And it came up with this success triangle. So time, money, and freedom. They're the three edges of the triangle, because I think a lot of landlords are out there and they haven't got their plan correct in their own head. They don't know where they're going with their investments. Now, there's a lot of people out there that do know that. But again, a lot don't. So I thought this was the easiest way to look at it, with sort of the first thing being money. So there's a lot of landlords out there that are in the investment game and property game to earn money, right? But I think a lot of people get into this not knowing exactly what the money subject is. They look at what they purchased the property for, they look at the rent that they get, and they look at yield. And those are three main things. But obviously with money, you've got other things within that as well, like, you know, how much is it going to cost you to maintain that property? How much is the tax going to cost you? And all of that. I've spoken to clients recently where they've turned around to me and said, look, this property's costing me money, didn't look at it correctly, been out of pocket with it. The only thing that's got going for it is the capital appreciation on the property, but I don't want to be in this for the next 10 years. So I'm just going to sell the property now. So that made me think of this, and really it's the money aspect. You've got to think about it in depth. It's not a case of just getting your rent, focusing on the yield, looking at capital appreciation. You need to look at the tax levels. You need to look at the repair levels of that property as well. I always say to clients that, look, with repairs, you probably need to keep back about 10% every month from the rent that you get. Put that into a pot, and then you can utilise that for any repairs that need to be done, insurances, all of that sort of stuff. If you don't do that, then there's going to become a point in time where, well, if you need that monthly rent and suddenly you've got to replace your boiler and it's going to cost you 1,600 quid, and you need that rental income for other things in your life, then you're not going to get that. So you're not planning for that tenancy and planning for the income for that tenancy correctly, because the correct people would budget that in.
Yeah. Do you think the majority of people then, you've got this kind of window of maybe 25% of people that are landlords that are very, very wealthy, big portfolios, you know, minimum finance on it, and they're kind of in a different place. If we then go to the kind of the general landlord that maybe has one accidental, or maybe they've got two now, and they're still working pretty much full time, and let's call that the kind of the normal kind of property investing circle for today's generation that are doing that. Do you think they have to pick one of these? Because my view is, if you either want freedom, which ultimately means you want to try and make yourself, the whole cliche, financially free, but you want to basically remove the need to have a career, to have a job. That's what you're trying to do. Through property, you're trying to make that your full-time profession, which is where the freedom classifies. Or you're looking that you're just trying to build a real money equity reserve. I'd put money in equity, because if you're trying to build money for monthly amounts, you're looking in the freedom bracket. So money, let's call it equity, you're looking long-term gain, 20, 30 years, and you want to be in a position where effectively when you retire, you can maybe bring retirement forward 15 years because you've done really well with your property assets, and maybe the mortgages are paid off on.
So they're very aggressive paying down style.
So you bring your retirement early, or you bring your pension into a different level, or you're looking at things from a time point of view, which that's very specific to each people. You know, we've had people on that have had health scares that wanted to change the course of their life from a time perspective. We've had people that kind of, you know, they don't want a full-time profession from property, but they do want to have time back in their life. So they're almost looking to kind of do the seesaw. But I guess you have to pick a lane, really. It's hard to kind of be all of that, isn't there, from day one?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you have to pick one to start with, but I think you can get to a point where all three of them apply. Because if I'm investing money, which you start off investing, well, with investing that money, then I want the freedom at the end of it, because I wouldn't invest otherwise. It's like I invest to be financially secure, to help my daughter when she's older and she's got a secure life, and I don't need to worry about anything. So I think from an investment point of view, yes, money, then freedom, and then the time aspect of things. Well, how much do you want to be involved with it? It depends whether you're running it as a business or whether you're running it as a hobby. You know, if you're running it as a business to get that money and to get that freedom at the end of it, then the time element, you need to shift stuff off to other people. You know, it's as business owners, which you are, you can't do everything within the business, or else you wouldn't have time to do everything everything else, right? So with the time, you don't want another part-time job. Let's take property for an example. So if you wanted your time back, and it depends how much you value your time. You know, my time would, if I say £100 an hour, I want to be paid. Okay, but the average time for a landlord to look after a property, if they do it themselves, because they're doing everything, they spend on average around 50 hours over a year on their rental property. So that's £5,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how much of that time out of the 50 hours would you want to spend going to the driving range, spending more time with your daughter, spending more time with your family, or, you know, spending an hour on yourself learning something new? It's all of those elements that I look at and I think, well, why can't I just get someone else to do this? I value my time too much to be doing all of these little
in those 50 hours is probably different measures of skill set, right? So that's the thing. Some of that you'll go, well, it's going to cost me a lot more to get someone else in to do it, so I'll just do it myself. But then some of it is going to be a lot cheaper to get someone else in to do it, so I should get them to do it. It's just finding that balance, really, is on the time.
And that's it, because if we look at the property, and there's a lot of self-managing landlords out there, and that's completely fine. But what people don't realise is that when they say that it's fine me managing the property myself, and you know, you spend an average of 50 hours over the year, well, it's not a case of just dealing with a tenant and then fixing the issue. It's other things, like you've got to get your accounts in order, so you've got to speak to an accountant, send them all the information. You've got to have your own statements, because you won't be getting rental statements from an agent, so you've got to collect all of that information to give to your accountant. You've got to keep up to date with legislation and updates, so you're spending more time having to read about those updates rather than hearing it from someone else and just giving them the 5 top things of what they need to know as a landlord. They're spending time project managing as well, because something could go wrong at the property. Well, they need to speak to the contractor. They need to make sure that the contractor goes out. They need to make sure that issue's been fixed and the tenant's happy. So they need to correspond with the tenant on that side of things. So all of these different elements is that once you start talking about it and weighing everything up, it's a hell of a lot that you need to do as a landlord in order to manage everything effectively. And you look at the time that you spend doing that, and it's a hell of a lot of time that you're wasting doing that. Some landlords want to be really involved because that they want to be, and that's fine. But when you look at the majority of landlords out there, I don't think that they understand the amount of time that goes in to making sure that everything is done correctly. And through that time, you lose that from your life when you could have been doing other things. And
you guys have spoke a lot, particularly, Andy, about, you know, renters' rights bill, and we've obviously had the rumours knocking around budgets with, you know, Labour and what comes next, and obviously that's moved back as well. But would you say, Mike, at the moment, for the landlords that are working full time, that have got 1 or 2, maybe 3 properties on the side, I would go as bold as saying potentially they're crazy if they're not using a professional management agent now, because of the risk of these quick changes that might happen. Because I don't know about you, but I'm in the industry, and sometimes I struggle to keep up with it. You know, fortunately, we've got Andy in the office who can
I struggle to keep up.
You struggle, but at least you do the research into it. But if I was
you struggle, Ian just doesn't.
Yeah. But as a landlord out there at the moment, with full time, you know, with kids at home, with the likelihood of changes over the next 3 years, where Labour is in, from a landlord point of view, really you do need to have like a professional support mechanism, a safety belt.
You need someone taking the liability off you, because I think with the renters' rights bills just had a date to go back to the Lords in October, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's still sort of flip-flopping, but it's going to happen. I think with landlords, there's a everything's fine mentality, but everything's fine until it's not. That's the problem. It's like, if you get caught out, the penalties are massive. And all it takes is someone in the tenant's ear, if you haven't registered a piece of paperwork or done something within a certain timescale, or even just issued it to them, you can get absolutely fucked. It's the only way to put it into the right terms.
expletive needs to now go on the podcast.
And it's like,
It's normally me, actually.
Yeah,
Mike's gone straight in there. Like,
it's just. But do you want that liability on your head, or would you rather pay to push it away? It's as simple as that. And if you're not a professional, then I would pay to push it away.
yeah, and there's a very small amount of people that could sit in the professional bracket.
Well, yeah, Andy runs a score app, which is a landlord survey of how compliant are you. I don't know how many 100% have come back in the few hundred responses that you've got.
I mean, it's minimal, probably less than 20%.
And there's about 1,500 landlords now that have done that.
Yeah,
you know,
and some of these leads that even came through were professional landlords that have got 10 plus properties, and even they were answering things incorrectly. So it just shows that
they just do it because they don't. It's like with anyone, with any job, you either choose to educate yourself and train yourself every year. You hear the business trainer saying, well, a professional athlete trains 95% of the time and performs 5%, whereas an employee in the UK or a business owner in the UK tends to train less than 5% of the time and perform 95% of the time. So a landlord tends to learn what they know when they buy the property in 2012 and not actually ever learn any more. And when you say, oh, by the way, the deposit holding came in 20 whatever it was, they'll be like, oh no, well, that wasn't a thing when I let it, so it's not a problem.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, yeah,
there's
kind of is.
There's a lot going on, isn't there? That's the thing. Like,
there's so much going on. You know, there's over 170 pieces of law surrounding rentals, surrounding lettings.
Yeah, they're about to throw them all up in the air.
And it's a completely going to change now with the new Renters' Rights Bill. And there's more information going out there to tenants on what should be done. Before, tenants didn't really know sort of their rights or anything like that. They just moved into a property and that's the way it used to be. But because there's so much media information going out now, tenants are clued up. So if you don't do anything or if you don't do the correct thing at the correct time, they will know. And then they'll come to you. Financially, it could destroy landlords because, you know, if they get hit with a fine for $30,000, I'm sure a lot of landlords out there don't have £30,000 to pay as a fine. So it's just about how much responsibility do you want? You know, if I was a landlord now, and I'm not just being biased because I run a lettings business, it's the simple fact that if I've got an investment, something like property with all of the regulation on it, I'd want someone else to be responsible for that.
Yeah.
And then that's when it comes down to using an agent. But that comes back to time as well, you know, going on about all of the changes, all of the updates, all of the stuff that you need to do at the correct time and what you need to do yearly and all of that sort of stuff. So much involved with keeping on top of and learning and having to do things that it's just your part-time job. It's a job on the side.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't not have housing insurance, you know, in case something happened. You know, it's a small percentage a month. It's the same. It's having a managing agent that's able to give you that valuable information is compliance insurance ultimately, isn't it? I mean, even if the former housing minister can innocently forget to pay stamp duty tax,
I like how you said that.
You know, anything can happen. I feel so sorry. I feel so sorry for it because we're all so busy. You know, if something like that can happen, then anything. So, probably a good way to wrap up the podcast and say to people that are listening, if you do want some help, support, you do want some information. I mean, Andy does a fantastic job with his current clients of every single month, sometimes bi-weekly, giving updates on things that have changed, you know, so you can sign up for that email list if you want to, or just have a chat with any of us about what you're doing with your properties. And if you just want some advice around it, then it's sometimes good to just soundboard a professional with that aspect of things as well. So, hopefully everyone's enjoyed the podcast. It's been nice being back on with the three of us. And we will be back in 2 weeks' time.